So, my first video, so give me a little bit of a break here. I'm not a video star, I'm not a radio star. I'm just an ordinary dude trying to get this thing explained. And hopefully, you find the information helpful. So, what I'm going to go over is some considerations when going solar. And I'm going to go over like what your goal is going in, uh, the rules and regulations that come into play. And lastly, because I'm in North Carolina, I'll go over a little bit about how Duke Energy operates. So, first video of the series, um, I'm still at the part where I've got a plan. That plan is being drawn up, and I need to get engineering stamps so that I can submit everything. But I have some of the pieces in place, and I know what I'm going to purchase and what I'm going to install and where I'm going to install it. So those things are already kind of hammered out. So you want to go solar in North Carolina. What is your goal? Are you wanting to do an off-grid system or an on-grid system? Uh, the rules and regulations are vastly different if you're going off-grid. So for off-grid, that means you don't have any utility power, or you don't have any utility power connected to your solar. Your solar is running a critical loads panel or some sort of electrical system or appliance in your home, and it's not connected to the grid. Or if it is connected, it's connected to a disconnect switch, meaning that if the solar goes out, you go out and you manually flip a switch, or you have some sort of an automatic transfer switch, which those are quite expensive. But you have an automatic transfer switch or a manual transfer switch that allows you to switch back to the grid. So whatever it is that you were powering with solar, you can continue powering with solar. So that is how you would set up the off-grid. The biggest cost when you're looking at an off-grid system is going to be the battery storage. Uh, the lithium-ion, lithium iron phosphate batteries are the go-to battery for solar. They're very stable. They have a long life expectancy. They have a good power density for the size. They work really well with solar, and most of your solar battery systems, they're using lithium iron phosphate. Whether it's your big high powered battery systems or your smaller ones. But the batteries are the most expensive piece to this whole thing. So when you're looking at off grid, you not only have to have an inverter that can supply enough power to whatever you're powering, but you also have to have enough solar panels to supply the power during the day to whatever you're powering and recharge all your battery system. Um, the inverter and the solar panels can be expensive, yes, but the battery bank is going to be by far the largest cost factor in this. So when you're doing that, you have to consider that. If I'm going off grid, I need enough battery so that the whole time that there's no sun up, I can still supply power to everything I need to operate. So keep that in mind if you're thinking off grid. On grid. So on grid is probably what most people are going to be setting up. The thing to keep in mind is if you have an inverter that has pass-through capability, the Solarc 12K, 15K. The one that I'm planning to install, the EG4 18K PV, which is a 12 kilowatt inverter. Those systems have pass-through capability, meaning my grid power can go directly into it. 200 amps is what I run in my house. So 200 amps can go into this thing. It will supply as much power as possible to my loads. And if the inverter cannot supply enough, it will use grid power to make up the difference. So in a system like this, that's where all the rules and regulations kick in. The North Carolina Utilities Commission and Duke Energy require you to have an interconnect agreement and net metering. So basically, if grid power flows through the system, you got to have net metering. These systems, if you read the instructions, you read the manuals, it'll tell you that they have an option that you can do a no sellback or grid zero, and you don't need a net metering agreement. It says that in the manual. The reality is the utility is the one that holds the big switch for power, and they're going to tell you that they don't care what the manual says. If their power runs through the thing, you have to have a net metering agreement. That's the way it works in North Carolina. Not sure if it works that way everywhere, but if you're doing North Carolina, that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. So, rules and regulations. So, North Carolina Utilities Commission is kind of your first, one of your first stops when you're planning this. Once you know what system you're wanting and you have a plan drawn up, you have to get a docket number. So the North Carolina Utilities Commission has a website that is horrible to navigate if you're not familiar with how it works. I'm no expert. I've been asking them questions, and I seem like I'm really bugging them because they would rather you go to someone who is experienced and does this all the time, and they just know how to do it and don't have to ask questions. As a homeowner, obviously this is the first time I'm doing it, and their website is not intuitive. But you have to go in, you have to request a docket number. They'll give you the docket number back after a week or two. The docket number has to go into your plans, and the plan is going to be what you're going to submit to the North Carolina Utility Commission and to Duke Energy and to your city planning department. So you got a docket number. Docket number goes on the plans. The plans are all done up. They're PDF, and they have to be PDF searchable. So it can't be just an image of your plans. They have to be able to do a word search on them if they want to. So that's in there. Duke Energy. Duke Energy requires you to fill out an interconnect request. So basically, you're telling them what system you're installing and that you want to have it interconnected with Duke Energy power. So that all has to be done. That all gets submitted. That's kind of the point I'm at right now. So how the process, how long it takes, and if I run into problems, I'll let you know in the future. Uh, the other thing that has to be done anytime you're doing anything electrical or building, you have to have city planning also. So that all has to be submitted to the city planning department. I have to pull a permit to install the solar panels, and I have to have an electrical permit, and the city will have to do an inspection on all of the electrical connections. So that's another piece. Uh, Duke Energy net metering. So let's just talk about net metering in general. So you go back several years when solar was kind of a new thing, and it was quite expensive. Uh, Solar panels were small. They were putting out 100 watts, and they were costing $300 or $400 a panel. Uh, Batteries, about the only thing out there was lead acid, so you had to have like a garage full of batteries, to really be able to do anything with it. Um, the technology's come so far, uh, and that's why the new net metering rules keep changing on us. So if your plan is to go solar and uh, zero out your utility bill, where you never have to pay anything to the utility, that is not going to happen. Just straight up not happening. If you go off grid and you build a big enough system, you might get close. I guess. I guess you could probably do that. But for the majority of the population, a general homeowner wanting to build a solar system to help supplement the power to the house, you're not going to zero your meter. And the reason is the way that Duke Energy sets up the net metering agreement, and they're not the only ones. Throughout the country, power systems are going to this type of a plan. But what they do, if you have solar and you have net metering, there's going to be a minimum monthly payment that you make for having solar. There's going to be a fee attached to it for based on how big your solar system is. The bigger it is, the more they charge you per month, because the more you can shave off of your utility bill. So they're getting their money. Um, you could look at this and say, well, that's not fair. I spent all this money on this solar. I shouldn't have to pay, Duke Energy anything. So here's what you have to consider, I guess. Duke Energy and all the power companies, their system is set up so that everyone pays in uh, based off of uh, the cost of power. A portion of that money that comes in is profit, but the rest of it covers operating costs. It covers the cost for all of the employees, for all of the trucks, for all the infrastructure, for all of the repairs that have to be done to the power lines and transformers and everything else anytime there's a storm event. So, well, you could sit back and go, well, their profits are astronomical. Yeah, they are. Buy stock. That would be my advice. Um, but what they're wanting to do, let's say they had it like the old net metering agreement, which was for every kilowatt you give us, we'll give you back one for free. Um, so you could have a giant solar system with no batteries. You could run your house during the day and push a massive amount of power to Duke Energy. And then at night, while you're using Duke Energy power, you basically zero out. you've sent them as much or more power in the daytime than you're going to use at night. So you have like no utility bill. So you're not paying for any of the infrastructure or any of the other fees and associated maintenance requirements of all the power, but you have the ability to use Duke Energy power at any time. So if your solar is down for maintenance, a problem with it, or it's been cloudy for a week straight, you still have Duke Energy power as your insurance policy, right? So if everyone did this that could, there's a lot of people that can't. You live in an apartment or you rent a house, or, there's so many people in that situation that could not install solar if they wanted to. But let's say that the people that could install solar, as the price has come down on installing a system, they decided to do this. And so now you have, instead of 10,000 people in the state, you got 500,000 people in the state that have solar and are pushing power to the grid during the day, which, by the way, Duke Energy probably doesn't need the power during the day. And at night, when they do need the power, you're not providing anything. So you got this giant insurance policy sitting out there, and you're not paying anything for it. That's kind of it in a nutshell. So they've changed the net metering rules, and they've done it so that there's a time of use agreement that goes into effect, and there's cost associated with having solar attached to the power grid, and that's to recoup those costs and keep everything fair. So let's say they didn't do this. They're a big company, they have buckets of money. Me not paying them is inconsequential. So, and if everyone took that thought process, you have to remember one thing: Duke Energy is not going to make less money next year than they made this year. Not going to happen. The whole thing is make more money each and every year. Our profits need to go up. So if everyone's doing solar and you got the old one-for-one net metering agreement, uh, they're losing revenue. And the more people that go on this, the more revenue they lose. So they got to make it up somewhere. So they're going to do that by increasing the cost of power for everyone. Well, you got solar, you're getting a one-for-one credit. You don't care. But your neighbor now is paying, 5 cents a kilowatt hour more than he did the year before because of your solar. That's, in my mind, that's how it works. Um, I'm sure there'll be folks out there that are willing to debate that. But to me, I understand, and I understand why they needed to change the rules. Uh, am I happy about it? No. Hey, I'd like a free ride. I would like to be able to say I spent money on solar, and so I have an investment into it, and I should get free power from now on. But the North Carolina Utilities Commission didn't see it that way. Duke Energy doesn't see it that way. And so there's a new net metering uh, plan that if you're installing solar, you're going to go with it. So, what type of solar are you wanting to do? If I go online and I look up a company that does solar installs, they're going to send a guy right over, and he's going to sit down and he's going to explain to you how you could pay $0 money into the utility. They're going to hook you up. They're going to build you a system. So my experience with this is that system costs about three times what the actual materials cost. So if you went and bought all of the material yourself, whatever that ends up being, uh, multiply it by three, and that's about what it's going to cost to have a company install it for you. Now, they're going to take care of all the planning, all the engineering, all of the docket from the North Carolina Utility Commission, and submitting plans to Duke Energy and getting your city inspection done. They're going to take care of all of that for you. Um, but most likely, uh, the most popular systems are uh, micro inverters on the back of the panel. So they're going to come out, they're going to look at your house, they're going to figure out where they can put panels on your roof, and they're going to install a roof mounted array. And each panel is going to have a micro inverter on it. And that micro inverter takes the DC power from the panel and it converts it to AC, and everything is all synced together. And it goes down and it comes into your power distribution panel, where your breakers are for your house, and it's going to come in on a breaker there, and that's going to supply power. It's going to backfeed your panel, and it's going to backfeed the grid. Um, this works. Um, for them, it's relatively a simple design. They design them all, it's kind of cookie cutter from house to house to house on how they're going to do this. Uh, the engineering is kind of cookie cutter. Once they've got it uh, down to a science, really the only engineering is looking at your roof structure to make sure that it can handle the additional weight load of the panels, and that the orientation is going to work. You're going to get enough sun on them that it's going to do something for you. So they'll come in and they'll do that system. So what are the drawbacks? Well, for me, cost was a big one. The other thing is going with the microinverters. If you want to have battery storage, it's extremely expensive. Way more than if you go with an EG4 system or a Solarc or Sunny Boy or GrowWatt. There's so many systems out there that are set up to run off of 48-volt battery storage. And that battery storage system, because there's competition in the market, the price has come down. And to me, I say it's reasonable. It's reasonable in comparison to where it was, 4 or 5 years ago. So I guess that's one of the main things. That's kind of like the Tesla Powerwall and those types of systems. They're extremely expensive for the amount of energy that you're able to store and get back out at night. So that's one system. So another drawback that to me was that um, my roof on my house is like 15 years old. I've had it inspected recently, and they say it's still good. It's going to be good for another 5, maybe 10 years before you have to worry about replacing it. But if I'm putting solar panels on the roof, I don't want a roof that's going to need to be replaced in 5 to 10 years, because all of it has to come back off in order to reshingle the roof. So an added cost would be for me to install a new roof on the house before I put roof mounted solar panels on it. And then you're still looking at some point in the future, you would have to pull the panels and everything if you needed to do a roof repair. So that was a big factor for me. So my system that I'm planning, what I'm wanting to do, is a ground mount with 20 panels. I'm looking at a 450 watt panels, and that's going to feed into the new EG4 18K PV inverter. It'll be grid tied, and I'm going to use their new Powerwall 280 amp hour battery. I like the price and I like the form factor because as I go into these videos, you'll see my space that I have to work with is limited. So it's going to work pretty well for me. Is that the system for everybody? No, probably not. Everybody's situation is going to be unique. How much space you have, where everything is located. Can you do a ground mount? Do you have enough room? Some of the things you have to deal with where I live, anything that you put on your property as a structure has to be past or behind the front facade of the house. So you could have a huge front yard and you can't do anything. You can't put a carport on it. You can't put a utility building on it. You can't put solar panels in it. So it has to be behind the house. So trees, shading, all of that goes into coming up with a plan. If you don't know how to plan that, then you need to find someone that can help you. Like I say, the big high roller companies, they'll do it all, but you're gonna pay for it. I've found someone that's helping me walk me through the process and help me buy the products at a good price. And I'll put a link to his name down in the info. But that would be my suggestion. That about wraps it up for this video. As I get farther into the planning process, I'll put out another video. And if you have questions or comments, leave them below, and I will try to answer them. I am not a certified electrician. I am not a professional engineer. I have a very technical background. I've been working with electronics for 40 years now, and I do have a degree. But the folks that are professional engineers and licensed electricians have knowledge that is beyond me. They do this stuff on a daily basis, and they really know what they're doing. To give you an example, if you're going to be an electrician, this book, NEC Code, I bought the 2023 version. Where I live, they're actually still using the older version. But the 2023 version has a lot of new information on how to do solar, like what the code requirements are going to be in the future. So my thought process was, well, if I'm designing and building the system that complies with this code, then I'm really covered for the current code. And from a safety perspective, I know I'm covered. But to give you an idea, that's how thick this book is. And if you're a licensed electrician, you're expected to know this information in order to do your job. So my hat's off to them. It's a lot of information to know, and I plan to be using a licensed electrician on this project. I'm going to do as much of it myself as I can, but the interconnection, the meter has to be pulled, all of that interconnection. I plan to use a licensed electrician so that I'm completely covered and I know that the grounding is set up correctly, and everything is laid out properly. I say that pretty much wraps up this video. If this is something you're interested in, stay tuned. As I go through this process, I'll build more videos and post them. Thank you.